Cruel wife versus kind surrogate. A billionaire, Sheikh falls in love with surrogate. Heartwarming Dubai. Romance story of 2024. My beautiful family, welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. I've been putting in 16 hours a day to bring you the best content, but the response on the last two videos has been low, and honestly, it breaks my heart. I truly believe in this journey, and I need your support more than ever. If you're satisfied with my efforts and enjoy my content, please write YES in the comments. It would mean the world to me and keep me motivated to work even harder. Together, we can grow this channel into something amazing. Thank you for being my family. Let's make it happen. The setting sun cast long shadows across Dubai's ultra-modern skyline, painting the glass and steel towers in hues of amber and gold. From his penthouse office in the Burj Al Rahman, Sheikh Salam Al Rahman stood motionless, his reflection ghosting against the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 38, he cut an imposing figure, tall and distinguished, with shoulders that carried the weight of his family's legacy with practiced ease. His dark eyes, usually sharp with business acumen, now held a distant melancholy as they traced the horizon where modern ambition met ancient desert. 20 years had passed since that fateful day when, at 18, he had signed away his cultural birthright in the name of love. The memory surfaced with crystal clarity. The ornate marriage contract, written in flowing Arabic script on handmade paper, its golden edges catching the light. One clause stood out from the rest, unusual in their culture, but demanded by his bride-to-be, a promise of monogamy, binding him to a single marriage in a society where men of his status routinely took multiple wives. Amina al-Malik had been a vision that day, the daughter of Dubai's most prominent prince, her beauty as legendary as her family's wealth. Her father's diamond empire spanned from the Gulf states to the finest boutiques of Europe, and her own brand, Amina's crown, had become synonymous with luxury in the international market. Their marriage was meant to be more than a union of hearts. It was a merger of empires, a joining of two of Dubai's most powerful families. The early days had been intoxicating. They traveled the world in their private jet, attended exclusive galas, and built dreams as grand as the architectural marvels rising from the desert sands. Sheikh Salam had been young, idealistic, and desperately in love with both Amina and the future they would build together. Their combined business acumen seemed unstoppable. Where his ventures faltered, her diamond empire provided stability, and where her brand needed expansion, his global connections opened doors. But love, like the desert roses that bloomed briefly after rare rains, proved fragile in harsh conditions. The first signs were subtle, a sharp word here, a dismissive gesture there. Amina's grace, so captivating in public, began to crack in private. Her ambition, once attractive, revealed a harder edge. She wielded her family's influence like a scimitar, subtle threats about his businesses wrapped in silk-smooth words. The Sheikh's fingers traced the cool glass of the window, his mind wandering through the maze of memories. He remembered the first time she had truly shown her hand, during a board meeting for one of his technology ventures. He had opposed her suggestion to cut funding for employee benefits, arguing that treated well, workers became family. Her eyes had turned to steel as she leaned close afterward, whispering how easily she could convince her father to withdraw support from his expansion into Europe. Yet he endured. The teachings of his faith and the wisdom of his father echoed in his mind. Patience was a virtue, and marriage a sacred bond. He channeled his energy into his businesses, transforming the Al Rahman name from merely wealthy to globally influential. His hotels dotted the world's most exclusive locations. His technology firms competed with Silicon Valley's finest, and his charitable foundations built schools and hospitals across the Middle East. The muezzin's call to Maghrib prayer floated through the air, a haunting reminder of time's passage. 20 years of marriage, and the greatest test of their union remained unspoken between them, the absence of children. The halls of their palatial home, filled with priceless art and antiques, echoed with emptiness. No pattering of little feet, no childish laughter, no next generation to inherit the vast empire they had built. At first, they had blamed timing. They were young, focused on empire building. Then, as the years slipped by like sand through an hourglass, the silence around the subject grew heavier. When he finally broached the topic, Amina's reactions ranged from cold dismissal to explosive anger. She blamed him, subtly at first, then with increasing venom. The whispers began in Dubai's high society. Was the great Sheikh Salam unable to produce an heir? Pride stung. He had quietly undergone every medical test available. The results were consistent. He was perfectly capable of fathering children. When he suggested Amina undergo similar tests, her rage had been unprecedented. Priceless vases shattered against walls, threats of divorce mingled with accusations of betrayal. Yet beneath her fury, he had caught something else in her eyes: fear. The sun dipped below the horizon, darkness sweeping across the city like an abaya drawn across a woman's shoulders. Light bloomed in response, thousands of artificial stars strung across buildings, roads and bridges, creating a constellation of human ambition. Sheikh Salam's reflection grew stronger in the darkening glass, and he studied the lines time and worry had etched around his eyes. Tomorrow he would visit the hospital again, this time not for himself, but to review the medical records department's security footage. A trusted source had whispered of Amina's secret visits, of files accessed and documents hidden. The truth lay waiting, like a scorpion in the sand, and he knew that once uncovered, it would change everything. For now, though, he turned from the window and prepared for dinner, where he would once again play his part in their elaborate charade. He would be the dutiful husband, she the perfect wife, their performance worthy of any stage. But beneath the surface, questions writhed like serpents. How long could a marriage survive on lies? What price was too high for keeping one's word? And most importantly, what secrets lay hidden in those medical files that Amina guarded so desperately? The elevator descended silently, carrying him from his office sanctuary to the garage where his driver waited. As the Rolls-Royce purred to life, Sheikh Salam closed his eyes, offering a silent prayer for strength. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own revelations. For tonight he would maintain the facade, ever the honorable man his father had raised him to be. Little did he know, as the car glided through Dubai's glittering streets, that fate was already in motion. The truth he sought would soon shatter the golden cage of his marriage, setting in motion events that would test not just his honor, but his very understanding of love, trust, and destiny. The desert winds were shifting, carrying with them the seeds of change, and somewhere in the vast tapestry of life, a young woman named Serenity was going about her day, unaware that her path would soon intersect with his in ways neither could imagine. The Rolls-Royce turned onto the palm-lined drive leading to his estate, where fountains danced and gardens bloomed in defiance of the desert climate. Behind the mansion's illuminated facades, Amina would be waiting, perfect and poised, their charade ready to begin anew. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, for the first time in 20 years, Sheikh Salam felt not just the weight of his promises, but also the first stirrings of rebellion against the chains of a contract that had become his prison. The car came to a stop, and as the driver opened his door, Sheikh Salam straightened his shoulders, adjusted his gleaming white thobe, and prepared to step into another evening of practiced smiles and polite conversation. The golden cage awaited its occupant, but somewhere in the distance the winds of change were gathering strength, promising a storm that would either destroy everything he had built or finally set him free. Chapter 2. Shattered Dreams. The morning sun had barely touched the spires of Dubai when Sheikh Salam entered the private wing of Al Rahim Medical Center. The hospital's marble floors echoed beneath his measured steps, each click of his handmade Italian shoes a countdown to a truth he both craved and dreaded. The air carried the familiar antiseptic scent unique to hospitals worldwide, a sharp contrast to the subtle oud perfume that clung to his crisp white thobe. Dr. Hassan, the hospital's chief administrator and a man who owed his position to the Sheikh's generous endowment, waited personally in the records department. His normally confident demeanor seemed subdued, hands clasped nervously before him as he bowed in greeting. "Your Excellency, I have prepared everything as requested. The security footage and file access logs from the past decade are ready for your review." The Sheikh nodded, his expression carved from stone. "Show me." In a private viewing room, the security footage played out its damning evidence. There was Amina, captured by cameras 4 years ago, slipping into the records department after hours. Her designer abaya couldn't disguise the furtive nature of her movements as she accessed certain files, photographed documents with her phone, then carefully returned everything to its place. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. The files she accessed. Sheikh Salam's voice remained steady, though his hands had tightened into fists beneath the desk. "I want them now." Dr. Hassan produced a thick medical file, its edges worn with age. "These are copies, Your Excellency. The originals remain sealed in our archives." He hesitated before adding, "What I'm about to show you, perhaps you should show me everything." The medical report dated back 12 years, 2 years before his marriage to Amina. The clinical language did nothing to soften its impact. Patient involved in severe automobile accident, emergency hysterectomy performed, complete loss of reproductive capability, psychological counseling recommended but declined. The words blurred before Sheikh Salam's eyes, not from tears, but from the surge of blood that pounded in his temples. 12 years. She had known for 12 years, even before their wedding. Every accusation she had hurled at him, every public humiliation about his supposed infertility, every tear she had shed blaming him, all of it had been an elaborate lie. The drive home passed in a haze of memories, each one taking on new, darker meanings. He remembered their engagement, how she had insisted on the monogamy clause with such passion. "I want you all to myself," she had whispered, her eyes shining with what he had thought was love. Now he understood. She had needed to ensure he could never take another wife, never discover her secret through the birth of children with another woman. Their palatial home rose before him, a masterpiece of modern Arabian architecture gleaming white against the desert sky. How many dreams had he woven within these walls? How many times had he imagined the sound of children's laughter echoing through its halls? All those dreams had been built on foundations of sand, destined to crumble at the first touch of truth. Amina was in her private salon when he entered, surrounded by the trappings of her privileged life. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the facets of the diamonds she wore so casually. Diamonds that had been both her heritage and her weapon. She looked up from her tablet, her perfect features arranged in their usual mask of sophisticated boredom. "You're home early," she observed, her voice carrying that slight edge that had become so familiar. The board meeting was never scheduled. Sheikh Salam's voice cut through the air like a blade. He held up the medical file, watching as recognition flickered across her face, followed by something he had rarely seen there. Fear. "Where did you get that?" The tablet slipped from her fingers, clattering on the marble floor. Its screen cracked, the spiderweb pattern a fitting metaphor for the moment. "Does it matter?" He opened the file, though he had already memorized its contents. 12 years ago you were in an accident that required emergency surgery, an accident that left you unable to bear children. Amina rose slowly, her designer dress whispering against the leather chair. You had no right. No right? The laugh that escaped him held no humor. I am your husband. For 10 years, I have endured your accusations. For 10 years, I have watched you twist every conversation about children into an attack on my manhood. For 10 years, I have honored a contract that you obtained through fraud. It wasn't fraud. Her composure cracked, voice rising with desperation. I loved you. I still love you. Love? He gestured around the opulent room. Love doesn't build itself on lies. Love doesn't manipulate and deceive. Love doesn't rob its partner of their dreams without even giving them a choice. What choice? She advanced on him, her carefully maintained facade crumbling, to be cast aside, to watch you marry some younger woman, bear your children, while I became nothing but a reminder of failure. You don't understand what it's like in our world, to be a woman who can't. Her voice broke, decades of buried pain surfacing at last. Sheikh Salam felt his anger falter, not at her tears, but at the glimpse of genuine anguish beneath them. You're right, I don't understand. I don't understand how you could make that choice for both of us. I don't understand how you could let me believe, year after year, that I was the one failing our marriage. I was afraid. The words seemed torn from her throat. When I had the accident, my father, he said no man would want a barren wife, but you were different, kind, honorable. I thought if I could bind you legally, make it impossible for you to seek children elsewhere, eventually you would accept it, accept me. And the accusations, the public humiliation. Was that part of your plan for acceptance? Amina's face hardened, her vulnerability disappearing behind familiar walls. I had to protect myself. If people suspected the truth? His voice rose for the first time. The truth is that you robbed me of choice, of dignity, of the chance to face this challenge together as true partners. The truth is that you chose deception over trust, manipulation over honesty. The truth is that every time you blamed me, belittled me, threatened my businesses to maintain your control, you proved that what we have isn't love at all. She moved toward him, one manicured hand outstretched. Habibi, please, don't. He stepped back, creating a gulf between them that felt wider than the desert itself. You've played your games for a decade, Amina. You've held me to a contract obtained through deception while breaking its most fundamental premise, trust. What we have isn't a marriage, it's a prison of your design, and I've been serving a sentence for a crime I didn't commit. What are you saying? Fear crept back into her voice. The contract is void. He placed the medical file carefully on her imported Italian desk. Any agreement obtained through fraudulent means is legally unenforceable. You knew this. It's why you fought so hard to keep this secret. You can't prove the hospital records, the security footage, your own medical history that you tried to hide. It's all there, Amina. Every lie, every deception, documented and dated. She sank into her chair, the fight leaving her body. For a moment she looked lost, vulnerable. The woman she might have been had she chosen honesty over deception. Then her features hardened, the mask sliding back into place. So this is how it ends. 20 years of marriage destroyed by a piece of paper? No. Sheikh Salam moved toward the door, feeling the weight of 2 decades of lies lifting from his shoulders. Our marriage was destroyed by your choices, Amina. The paper just proves what I should have seen years ago, that love without trust is like a desert without water. It cannot sustain life. What will you do? He paused at the threshold, looking back at the woman who had been both his greatest love and his greatest deception. What you should have done 12 years ago. I will seek the truth, wherever it leads me." As he walked away, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the mansion, Amina's rage finding expression in destruction, as it had so many times before. But this time Sheikh Salam didn't turn back. His steps carried him to his private study, where he immediately called his lawyers. The path ahead would be complex, politically delicate, and potentially scandalous, but for the first time in years, he felt truly free. That evening, as the sun set over Dubai, casting long shadows across the city he had helped build, Sheikh Salam stood once again at his office window. The reflection that gazed back at him seemed different, older perhaps, but also unburdened. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, legal battles, social repercussions, the delicate task of unwinding 2 decades of shared life and business interests. But for now, he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, a future he had never dared to imagine was taking shape. He didn't know yet that this future would lead him to America, to a chance encounter with a young woman named Serenity, to a love built on trust rather than deception. All he knew was that the golden cage had finally cracked, and through that crack, the first breath of freedom had begun to flow. As night fell over Dubai, Sheikh Salam al-Rahman, for the first time in 20 years, began to dream again. Chapter 3. An American Angel. The autumn wind swept through the streets of Philadelphia, carrying with it the scent of approaching winter and the whispered promises of change. Leaves in shades of amber and crimson danced across the pavement outside the towering glass edifice of Al-Rashid International, where Sheikh Salam had established his American headquarters. Inside, on the ground floor, Serenity Matthews moved silently through the pre-dawn quiet, her cleaning cart the only sound in the empty corridor. At 18, Serenity carried herself with a grace that belied her circumstances. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a practical braid, her uniform clean and pressed despite its worn edges. 8 years of being both sister and mother to young Sarah had etched a mature wisdom in her deep blue eyes, while her gentle movements spoke of someone who had learned to navigate life's hardships without letting them harden her heart. The memory of that morning's goodbye still lingered in her mind as she methodically cleaned each office. Sarah, now 10, had hugged her tightly before boarding the school bus, her backpack almost as big as she was. "I got an A on my science project," she had announced proudly, and Serenity's heart had swelled with both joy and pain. Joy at her sister's achievements, pain at the knowledge that soon they wouldn't be able to afford even this modest public school education. The cleaning company had cut hours again, and their tiny apartment's rent had increased for the 3rd time this year. The college fund Serenity had been trying to build for Sarah, dollar by precious dollar, was now being used just to keep food on the table. Their parents' insurance money, carefully rationed over the years, had finally run dry. She paused at the window of the executive floor, 40 stories above Philadelphia. The city stretched out before her, its lights twinkling like fallen stars against the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere out there was the wreckage of their old life. The house they'd lost, the private school Sarah had been pulled from, the dreams their parents had once nurtured. The car accident that had claimed their lives had done more than create orphans. It had set in motion a slow descent from middle-class comfort to grinding poverty. "You're here early." The voice, accented and unexpectedly gentle, made her start. Sheikh Salam stood in the doorway of his private office, his traditional thobe exchanged for an impeccably tailored Western suit. He hadn't been expected in Philadelphia for another week. The office had been buzzing about his impending visit for days. "I'm sorry, Your Excellency." Serenity stepped back from the window, her cheeks flushing. "I didn't realize anyone would be here so early. I can come back later." "No, please." He gestured for her to continue her work. but his dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You're usually here this early?" "Yes, sir." She moved to empty his wastebasket, keeping her movements efficient and professional. "I like the quiet. It gives me time to think." "About what?" The question surprised her. Wealthy men like him rarely showed interest in the thoughts of cleaning staff, but something in his expression, a shadow of sadness perhaps, made her answer honestly. "About my sister, mostly. About how to give her the future our parents would have wanted for her." Sheikh Salam moved to the window where she had been standing, his reflection overlaying the city lights. "You raise her alone?" "Since I was 10. Serenity straightened a stack of magazines on his side table, noting how the headlines trumpeted his business successes. "Our parents died in a car accident. Sarah was only 2. 10 years old," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "A child raising a child. We manage." She smiled slightly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sarah's brilliant, straight A's, even though we had to move her to public school. She deserves so much more than I can give her, but resources are limited." He turned from the window, and in the gathering dawn light, she saw something shift in his expression. "Tell me, Miss Matthews, Serenity Matthews. Miss Matthews, how far would you go to secure your sister's future?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Serenity felt her spine straighten, protective instincts flaring. "That depends, Your Excellency, on what's being asked of me." A ghost of approval flickered across his features. "A diplomatic answer, please. Sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Serenity hesitated, acutely aware of her uniform, her cleaning cart still in the doorway. But something in his manner suggested this wasn't a casual conversation, and Sarah's future hung constantly in the balance of every decision she made. She sat, perched on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap. Sheikh Salam settled behind his desk, his movements carrying the easy grace of a man accustomed to power. "I've been watching you, Miss Matthews. For the past week I've observed how you work, how you carry yourself. My security team has done a background check. Standard procedure for all employees in the building. Your story is remarkable." She tensed. "Sir, if there's something wrong with my background check..." "On the contrary." He held up a hand to forestall her concerns. "Your record is impeccable. A young woman who maintained perfect grades while working part-time until her high school graduation, who secured custody of her sister at 16 through a demonstration of extraordinary maturity and responsibility, who has never missed a day of work, never failed to pay a bill on time, despite circumstances that would break many adults." Relief mingled with confusion in her chest. "Thank you, but why are you telling me this?" "Because I have a proposition for you." He leaned forward, his fingers steepled on the desk. "One that could secure your sister's future and solve a personal matter for me as well." The sun had risen enough to paint the office in hues of gold, casting long shadows across the imported carpet. Sheikh Salam rose, moving to a small bar where he poured 2 glasses of water. He handed one to Serenity before continuing. "My marriage of 20 years recently ended," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "The details are complicated, but the relevant fact is this. I need an heir. My businesses, my charitable foundations, my entire legacy requires succession planning. But I cannot marry again, not in the traditional sense. The political and social implications in Dubai would be problematic." Serenity's fingers tightened around the water glass. "I don't understand what this has to do with me. I'm proposing a contract." He returned to his desk, removing a thick envelope from a drawer. "I need a child, one child, to to secure my legacy. In return, I'm prepared to offer compensation that would ensure your sister's education through graduate school, if she chooses to go that far. Private school now, any college she wishes later, plus a trust fund that would guarantee her financial security for life. The water glass trembled in Serenity's hands. You want me to have your baby? Like a surrogate? In essence, yes. His voice remained gentle, but his eyes were intent on her face. The arrangement would be completely legal, drafted by top attorneys. You would come to Dubai for the duration of the pregnancy, living in a private wing of my estate. Your sister would remain in boarding school here in Pennsylvania, where she would receive the best education available. After the birth, you would be free to return to your life here, knowing that Sarah's future is secure. The compensation... She could barely form the words. How much? $20,000 paid immediately upon signing the contract, plus all medical expenses, living expenses in Dubai, and the full cost of Sarah's education, approximately $500,000 over the course of her academic career. The amount made her head spin. It was more money than she could earn in a decade of cleaning offices. Sarah could go to any school she wanted, could pursue any dream. But the implications of what he was asking... I would need time, she whispered, to think about it. Of course. He slid the envelope across the desk. Take this. Review it with a lawyer if you wish. I'll cover the legal fees, but I need your answer within a week. My schedule requires me to return to Dubai by then. Serenity rose on shaky legs, the envelope clutched in her hands. The weight of it seemed to pull at her very soul. Why me? She asked suddenly. You could find willing surrogates through agencies, women with experience. Sheikh Salam's expression softened slightly. Because in you I see something rare, genuine nobility of spirit. You've faced hardship without becoming hard. You've shouldered adult responsibilities without losing your compassion. These are qualities I would wish for in the mother of my child, even if our arrangement is unconventional. The morning sun had fully risen now, transforming the office into a chamber of light and shadow. Serenity stood in that liminal space, feeling the weight of the moment press upon her. In her mind, she saw Sarah's face, bright with intelligence and hope. She saw their tiny apartment, the mounting bills, the dwindling opportunities. She saw two paths stretching before her, one familiar and increasingly desperate, the other unknown but offering salvation of a sort. 1 week, she said finally, her voice stronger than she felt. 1 week, he agreed. And Miss Matthews, whatever you decide, your job here is secure. This conversation never happened if you wish it so. She nodded, unable to form more words, and walked from his office on legs that felt like water. The cleaning cart waited in the hallway, a reminder of her current reality. But the envelope in her hands held the possibility of a different future, one that would require her to make the hardest decision of her life. As she rode the elevator down to the ground floor, Serenity reflected on the strange turns life could take. 8 years ago, she had been a child thrust into an adult's role by tragedy. Now she stood at another crossroads, holding in her hands the power to change not just her life, but Sarah's as well. The question was, at what cost? The morning shift workers were beginning to arrive as she wheeled her cart back to the maintenance area. They nodded to her in passing, unaware that their quiet cleaning lady had just been offered a devil's bargain by one of the world's wealthiest men. As she changed out of her uniform, her fingers brushed the envelope in her bag, and she thought of Sarah's dreams, of college applications and opportunities that had seemed impossible just hours ago. Sometimes, she realized, the hardest choices weren't between right and wrong, but between different kinds of sacrifice. As she stepped out into the autumn morning, leaves crunching beneath her feet, Serenity Matthews began the long walk home, carrying with her a contract that could change everything, for better or worse. Chapter 4. The Contract. The envelope sat unopened on Serenity's small kitchen table for 2 days, its presence as heavy as a stone in still water. Each time she passed it, her fingers would brush its expensive paper, but she couldn't bring herself to break the seal. The weight of its contents, both literal and metaphorical, seemed to alter the gravity in their modest apartment, pulling everything toward its epicenter. On the third morning, as dawn painted the Philadelphia sky in watercolor hues, Serenity finally sat down with a cup of coffee and opened it. Sarah had just left for school, her goodbye hug still warm around Serenity's shoulders, and the empty apartment felt like a confessional booth, a place for honest reflection and difficult decisions. The contract inside was printed on heavyweight paper, the kind that spoke of old money and serious intentions. 40 pages of legal language laid out the terms of what Sheikh Salam was proposing, each clause more detailed than the last. The numbers made her coffee grow cold in her hands. $20,000 upon signing, comprehensive medical coverage, a trust fund for Sarah that would cover education through graduate school at any institution worldwide, plus living expenses. But it was the smaller details that caught in her throat. The requirement for absolute secrecy, the specific timeline for her stay in Dubai, the carefully worded clauses about parental rights and future contact. Every possible scenario seemed to have been anticipated and addressed, as if an army of lawyers had worked to close every loophole, answer every question before it could be asked. Attached to the contract was a business card for Patricia Winters, a family law attorney in Center City, Philadelphia. A handwritten note from Sheikh Salam indicated that Ms. Winters had been retained to represent Serenity's interests, all fees prepaid. It was a gesture of fairness that spoke to his character, even as it underscored the gravity of what he was proposing. The law office occupied the entire 10th floor of a historic building overlooking Rittenhouse Square. Patricia Winters proved to be a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human drama. She reviewed the contract with Serenity for 3 hours, explaining each clause in detail, highlighting both protections and obligations. "This is one of the most comprehensive surrogacy agreements I've ever seen," Ms. Winters said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Sheikh Al-Rahman's lawyers have thought of everything, the medical provisions alone." She tapped a section of the contract. "You'd have access to the best health care in the world, and the educational trust for your sister. It's ironclad. Even if something happened to the sheikh, those funds would be secure." "And my rights?" Serenity's voice was barely above a whisper. "After the baby, you would have none." Ms. Winters' directness was gentle but firm. "The contract is explicit on this point. Once the child is born, all parental rights transfer to Sheikh Al-Rahman. You would be prohibited from making any future claims or attempting contact. Your role would be strictly biological." Serenity nodded, her fingers tracing the edges of the paper. "And it's all legal." International surrogacy law is complex, but yes, his lawyers have structured this carefully to comply with both US and UAE regulations. The only question that remains is, can you live with these terms? It was the question that haunted Serenity through sleepless nights, that followed her through her cleaning shifts at Al Rashid International, that whispered in her ears as she helped Sarah with homework. Could she carry a child for 9 months, feeling it grow beneath her heart, knowing she would have to walk away? Could she bear the weight of such a secret, carrying it alone through all the years to come? But then she would look at Sarah, bright and beautiful at 10 years old, already showing signs of the remarkable woman she could become with the right opportunities. She thought of college applications looming in the future, of dreams that required more than a cleaning woman's salary could provide. The choice, she realized, had been made the moment she'd opened that envelope. The day she signed the contract, autumn had painted Philadelphia in its finest colors. Sheikh Salam's private office was bathed in morning light, the city spread out below like a tapestry of possibility. His lawyer was present, as was Ms. Winters, but Serenity barely noticed them. Her attention was fixed on the Sheikh himself, on the gravity and respect with which he handled the moment. "You're certain?" he asked quietly, just before she lifted the pen. "Once signed, there can be no change of heart." Serenity met his gaze steadily. "I'm certain. For Sarah, I would do anything." The pen felt heavy in her hand as she signed each copy of the contract, her signature flowing across pages that would alter the course of multiple lives. Sheikh Salam signed after her, his pen scratching quietly in the hushed office. When it was done, when the lawyers had witnessed and notarized every page, he handed her an envelope containing the promised $20,000. "The arrangements for your sister's boarding school have been made," he said. "Westbrook Academy. It's one of the finest in Pennsylvania. She can start next week if you wish." Telling Sarah was the hardest part. Serenity had prepared a careful story about a job opportunity abroad, about the amazing school she could now attend, about how this temporary separation would lead to a better future for them both. But looking into her sister's eyes, seeing the mix of excitement and fear there, the rehearsed words stuck in her throat. They visited Westbrook Academy together, walking the manicured grounds that looked like something from a movie. The dormitory rooms were cozy, the classrooms filled with technology Sarah had only dreamed of, the library vast enough to get lost in. The headmistress, briefed on their situation, though not its true nature, was warm and reassuring. "She'll be well cared for," she promised Serenity. "Many of our students come from families working internationally. We understand the challenges and provide extensive support." Sarah's room would be shared with another girl her age, the daughter of a diplomat currently stationed in Geneva. The walls were freshly painted in cheerful colors, the beds dressed in crisp linens, the desks equipped with new laptops, all arranged by Sheikh Salam's efficient staff. Looking at it, Serenity felt a complex mix of gratitude and grief. This was what she'd wanted for Sarah, but the price of providing it was about to become very real. The night before Sarah was to start at Westbrook, they had a sleepover in their old apartment, camping out in the living room like they used to do when their parents first died. They made popcorn, watched their favorite movies, and talked until the early hours of the morning. Sarah's excitement about her new school bubbled over, but Serenity caught the moments when fear would flash across her young face. "You'll call every day?" Sarah asked, as they lay in their makeshift bed of blankets and couch cushions. "Every single day," Serenity promised, pulling her sister close. "And we'll video chat whenever we can. It's not goodbye, sweetie. It's just a pause. A chance for both of us to grow in different ways." "But why Dubai? Can't you find work here?" Serenity stroked Sarah's hair, her heart aching. "Sometimes the best opportunities come in unexpected places. This job, it's going to change everything for us. You'll see." The next morning, as they stood in Sarah's new dormitory room, the goodbye they'd been avoiding could no longer be postponed. Sarah's roommate and her parents had tactfully stepped out, leaving the sisters alone for their final moments together. "I'm scared," Sarah whispered, clinging to Serenity with sudden desperation. "What if I can't do this?" "You can do anything." Serenity's voice was fierce with conviction. "You're the strongest, smartest person I know, and this isn't forever. It's just for a little while. Think of all the adventures you'll have here, all the friends you'll make, and I'll be back before you know it." They held each other for a long moment, neither wanting to be the first to let go. Finally, Serenity kissed her sister's forehead and stepped back, memorizing every detail of Sarah's face. "I love you more than anything in this world. Never forget that." "I love you too." Sarah's voice trembled, but she stood straight and tall, trying to be brave. "Promise you'll be careful in Dubai." "I promise." Serenity managed a smile. "Now show me that Matthew strength. Head up, shoulders back, just like Mum used to say." Sarah squared her shoulders, lifting her chin despite the tears in her eyes. It was this image that Serenity carried with her as she walked away, her baby sister standing strong and proud, ready to embrace her own adventure, even as their paths diverged. The drive back to Philadelphia was a blur of autumn colors and unshed tears. In her purse, a first-class ticket to Dubai waited alongside her newly issued passport, both arranged by Sheikh Salam's staff with remarkable efficiency. In 3 days, she would board a plane to begin a journey that would ask more of her than she'd ever imagined possible. That evening, in her apartment for the last time, Serenity packed away their shared life. Sarah's room had been cleared for her move to Westbrook, but traces of her remained: a forgotten hair ribbon, a drawing tucked behind the desk, the height marks on the doorframe that tracked her growth. Serenity touched each one gently, like pressing flowers between pages of a book she might not open again for a very long time. The contract sat on her kitchen table, its weight now distributed across multiple lives. Tomorrow, she would begin her part of the bargain, stepping into a world as foreign to her as the surface of the moon. But tonight, in the quiet of her familiar spaces, she allowed herself to feel the full magnitude of what she had chosen: the hope and fear, the sacrifice and possibility, all wrapped together in a decision that would reshape not just her future, but the futures of everyone touched by that elegant legal document. As night fell over Philadelphia, Serenity Matthews stood at her window one last time, watching the city lights bloom in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Sarah was settling into her new life at Westbrook. Somewhere across the ocean, Sheikh Salam was preparing for her arrival. And here, in this moment between what was and what would be, she offered up a silent prayer for strength to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 5. Palace of Thorns. Dubai materialized from the desert like a mirage at dawn, its towers piercing clouds tinged pink by the rising sun. Serenity pressed her face to the first-class window, watching the city's impossible geometry take shape below. After 15 hours in the air, reality had taken on a dreamlike quality, making the glittering metropolis seem even more surreal. Sheikh Salam's private driver met her at the terminal, a discreet figure in a pristine uniform who handled her modest luggage as if it were filled with precious cargo. The Rolls-Royce glided through Dubai's streets, each turn taking them deeper into a world that seemed to exist in defiance of nature itself. When they finally passed through the gates of the Al Rahman estate, Serenity's breath caught in her throat. The palace, for there was no other word for it, rose from manicured gardens like something from a fairy tale. Fountains danced in defiance of the desert heat, while date palms swayed in artificial groves. The building itself was a masterpiece of modern Arabian architecture, all sweeping lines and elegant arches, its white walls gleaming in the morning sun. A butler named Hassan greeted her at the entrance, his English impeccable and his manner professionally warm. "Welcome to Qasr al-Rahman, Miss Matthews. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your wing of the residence." Her wing, as it turned out, was larger than her entire apartment building in Philadelphia. The suite of rooms had been decorated in a subtle fusion of Eastern and Western styles, comfortable enough to feel welcoming to an American, but with enough Arabian touches to remind her where she was. The windows offered a view of the private gardens, where peacocks strutted between carefully tended roses. "This will be your private space," Hassan explained, indicating the sitting room, bedroom, dressing room, and ensuite bathroom. "The staff has been instructed to attend to your needs. However," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "it would be best if you remained in these rooms unless specifically invited elsewhere. Madam Amina is particular about household protocols." Serenity nodded, understanding the warning beneath his diplomatic phrasing. She had known this wouldn't be easy, but the reality of living under the same roof as Sheikh Salam's ex-wife was only now beginning to sink in. She didn't have to wait long for her first encounter with Amina. That very evening, as Serenity was unpacking the few belongings she'd brought, a sharp knock preceded the door swinging open without waiting for a response. Amina al-Malik swept into the room like a desert storm, her designer abaya whispering against marble floors, diamonds glinting at her throat and wrists. "So," Amina's voice dripped with carefully cultivated disdain, "this is what $20,000 buys these days. Tell me, girl, did you think this through? Did you imagine you would be welcomed here like some kind of fairy tale princess?" Serenity straightened, forcing herself to meet those cold eyes. "No, ma'am. I'm here to fulfill a contract, nothing more." "A contract?" Amina laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Is that what you call selling yourself? In my country, we have other words for women who trade their bodies for money." The insult stung, but Serenity kept her voice steady. "I'm here because Sheikh Salam offered me an opportunity to secure my sister's future. That's all." "Ah, yes, the tragic orphan and her little sister. How convenient." Amina moved through the room like a predator, running manicured fingers over Serenity's modest possessions. "Let me be clear. You are here to serve a purpose, like a brood mare. You will not eat with the family. You will not wander the palace. You will not attempt to curry favor with my husband. When your purpose is served, you will disappear back to whatever hole you crawled out of." "Understood?" "Ex-husband," Serenity corrected quietly, immediately regretting the words as Amina's eyes flashed. The slap was swift and stinging, delivered with enough force to snap Serenity's head to the side. "You dare!" Amina hissed. "You are nothing here. Remember that." She swept from the room as suddenly as she'd entered, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the red mark of her hand on Serenity's cheek. Only when the door closed did Serenity allow herself to shake, pressing cool fingers to her burning skin. The following weeks settled into a routine of carefully navigated territories and calculated cruelties. Amina, it seemed, had elevated the art of psychological warfare to new heights. When she wasn't ignoring Serenity's existence entirely, she found creative ways to assert her dominance and reinforce the American girl's outsider status. During a formal dinner, to which Serenity had been specifically invited by Sheikh Salam, Amina orchestrated her first public humiliation. As Serenity reached for her water glass, a servant appeared suddenly at her elbow, bumping her arm and sending the crystal tumbler crashing to the floor. The silence that followed was deafening. "How clumsy," Amina's voice carried across the table. "But what can one expect? It must be quite an adjustment, using proper crystal when one is accustomed to paper cups, is it?" The servants, clearly acting on previous instructions, were slow to clean up the mess, leaving Serenity to sit in awkward silence while water spread across the expensive carpet. Sheikh Salam's jaw tightened, but protocol and the presence of important guests prevented him from intervening. Another time, Amina arranged for all of Serenity's Western clothes to disappear from her closet, replaced by traditional abayas that were deliberately 2 sizes too large, making her look like a child playing dress-up. When Serenity was forced to appear in one for a doctor's appointment, Amina's laughter echoed through the marble halls. "See how she shambles about like a desert camel. No grace, no dignity. But then, one can't buy class, can one?" The cultural barriers were weaponized with surgical precision. When Serenity attempted to thank the kitchen staff in Arabic, phrases she had carefully learned from Hassan, Amina happened to be passing by. "Oh, how precious," she sneered. "The little American thinks she can speak our language. Tell me, does it feel exotic to you? Like playing Arabian Nights? Don't embarrass yourself, or us, by pretending to be something you're not." Even Serenity's pregnancy was used against her. During a routine checkup, Amina insisted on being present, speaking rapidly in Arabic to the doctor and refusing to translate. Only later did Serenity learn from a sympathetic nurse that Amina had been suggesting various procedures and tests that were unnecessary and potentially stressful for both mother and child. The worst moment came when Serenity, missing Sarah desperately, had baked a batch of chocolate chip cookies, their mother's recipe, in the palace kitchen during what she thought were safe hours. The smell drew several curious servants, and for a brief moment, the kitchen felt warm and friendly as she shared the treats and stories of home. Amina's arrival shattered the moment like a stone through glass. She took one look at the scene, Serenity in an apron, surrounded by smiling servants enjoying American cookies, and her face transformed with rage. "What is this?" she demanded in Arabic, causing the servants to scatter. "You dare to corrupt my staff with your common food, your American pollution." She swept the remaining cookies into the trash with one elegant arm. "The kitchen is not your domain. You are not here to make friends or spread your inferior culture. You are here to breed, nothing more. The next time I find you attempting to curry favor with my staff, there will be consequences." Through it all, Serenity maintained a dignity that seemed to infuriate Amina even more. She never complained to Sheikh Salam, never retaliated, never let her tormentor see her cry. At night, alone in her luxurious prison, she would call Sarah and listen to stories of school adventures, of new friends and challenging classes, of a world opening up with possibilities. Those conversations became her armor, reinforcing her purpose and strengthening her resolve. Sheikh Salam, for his part, seemed torn between his natural inclination to protect and the delicate political balance he had to maintain. The divorce was still fresh, and Amina's family's influence in Dubai business circles remained significant. While he ensured Serenity had everything she physically needed, he couldn't overtly defend her without risking broader repercussions. Still, there were small kindnesses. Extra phones appeared in her room after Amina had the first one disconnected. New books would materialize on her coffee table, always in English, often featuring strong female protagonists. When Amina ordered the kitchen to serve Serenity's meals last, ensuring they would be cold, fresh plates would mysteriously find their way to her room through Hassan's discreet intervention. As her pregnancy progressed, Serenity found strength in unexpected places. The very isolation Amina enforced became a kind of peace, allowing her to focus on the life growing within her. She wrote long letters to Sarah, filling them with sanitized versions of her experiences and encouragement for her sister's studies. She learned to find beauty in the desert sunsets visible from her windows, in the call to prayer that floated through the air 5 times a day, in the quiet dignity of the servants who risked Amina's wrath to show her small kindnesses. One evening, about 3 months into her stay, Serenity stood on her private balcony, watching the sun sink behind Dubai's skyline. The city glowed like a jewel box, its lights coming alive as darkness fell. Below in the gardens, she could hear the fountains playing their endless symphony, while the scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted up from the carefully tended beds. "Your sister's midterm reports arrived today," Sheikh Salam's voice came from the doorway, making her start. He seldom visited her rooms, conscious of the gossip it might generate. "She's top of her class in mathematics and science." Serenity turned, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Really? That's wonderful. The headmistress says she has remarkable potential." He moved to join her at the balcony railing, maintaining a respectful distance. "You've given her an incredible gift, you know." "Sometimes the greatest gifts require the greatest sacrifices," Serenity quoted softly, remembering something her mother used to say. Sheikh Salam was quiet for a moment, watching the play of lights across his city. "I see how Amina treats you," he said finally. "I know these months haven't been easy." "I knew what I was agreeing to," Serenity replied, one hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. "Or at least, I thought I did. No one could have prepared for Amina's particular brand of cruelty." His voice held a note of old pain. "I should do more to protect you." "You do enough." Serenity turned to face him fully. "I understand the position you're in. Besides, I'm stronger than she thinks. We both are." The last words were spoken with a gentle pat to her abdomen. His eyes followed the gesture, something softening in his expression. "Yes, you are." He reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope. "Sarah's art teacher sent this. I thought you might like to see it." Inside was a drawing, a colorful scene of two girls holding hands beneath a bright sun. The smaller figure had written, "I love you, Serenity," in careful letters across the top. Serenity traced the words with her finger, feeling tears threaten. "Thank you," she whispered. Sheikh Salam nodded once and turned to leave, but paused at the door. "The palace gardens are lovely at sunset," he said carefully. "Perhaps you might enjoy walking them tomorrow evening. I believe Amina will be attending a charity gala off-grounds." The invitation was clear, and Serenity felt a small warmth bloom in her chest, not of attraction or romance, but of simple human kindness. "I'd like that," she said softly. After he left, Serenity remained on the balcony, watching night claim the desert kingdom that had become her temporary home. Sarah's drawing clutched to her heart. She offered a quiet prayer of thanks for the strength to endure, for the purpose that gave meaning to her sacrifice, and for the small moments of grace that made the thorns bearable. Tomorrow, Amina would undoubtedly find new ways to remind her of her place. But tonight, under the vast Arabian sky, Serenity Matthews stood tall, unbroken and unafraid, knowing that every thorn endured brought her sister one step closer to the future she deserved. Chapter 6. The Accident. The day that changed everything began like any other in Dubai's endless summer. Sheikh Salam rose before dawn for Fajr prayers, the first light touching the city's spires as he completed his devotions. Breakfast was served on his private terrace. Dates, labna, fresh bread, and the strong Arabic coffee that fueled his demanding schedule. The morning papers spoke of his latest business triumph, a billion-dollar development deal that would transform Dubai's coastline. In his study, Hassan had arranged the day's schedule with military precision. Board meetings, investment reviews, a lunch with government officials, and site visits to ongoing projects. But it was the final appointment that held Sheikh Salam's attention. A private meeting with his lawyers regarding Amina's increasingly aggressive demands for additional divorce compensation. The irony wasn't lost on him. After hiding her infertility and manipulating their marriage contract, after tormenting Serenity with calculated cruelty, Amina still believed herself entitled to more. Her family's influence made the situation delicate, but Sheikh Salam had finally reached his limit. Today's meeting would establish boundaries that should have been set years ago. As his driver navigated Dubai's morning traffic, Sheikh Salam's thoughts drifted to Serenity. Her quiet dignity in the face of Amina's abuse had earned his deepest respect. Now, 4 months pregnant, she carried herself with a grace that transcended her circumstances. Just yesterday, he had glimpsed her in the garden at sunset, one hand resting protectively over the gentle swell of her abdomen, her face lifted to catch the last rays of light. The image had stayed with him, a reminder of the pure motives that had brought them to this arrangement. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. Sheikh Salam's business empire required constant attention, and he gave it his full focus. By late afternoon, he had closed 2 major deals, approved expansion plans for his technology division, and authorized funding for a new children's hospital. Success had always come naturally to him, but lately it felt hollow without an heir to inherit his legacy. The lawyer's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming tower in Dubai's financial district. The meeting was contentious but productive. His legal team had assembled irrefutable evidence of Amina's deception, enough to nullify any further claims on his estate. As he left the office at sunset, Sheikh Salam felt lighter than he had in months. Finally, he could close this chapter of his life and focus on the future. The accident happened so quickly that later he would only remember fragments, the setting sun reflecting off a neighboring building, momentarily blinding his driver, the screech of tires as another vehicle swerved into their lane, the sickening sensation of the Rolls-Royce rolling, metal crushing like paper, glass shattering in a deadly symphony. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Sheikh Salam was aware of pain, of being trapped, of voices shouting in Arabic and English, the scent of gasoline mixed with blood. Someone was praying loudly, the familiar words of the Shahada floating through the chaos. Later, he would learn it was his driver, who had survived with minor injuries, asking Allah's mercy for them both. The emergency response was swift, one advantage of the accident occurring in the heart of Dubai. First responders worked methodically to extract him from the wreckage, their movements careful but urgent. The last thing Sheikh Salam remembered before losing consciousness was a young paramedic's face, lips moving in what might have been reassurance or prayer. He woke to the sterile whiteness of Dubai's most exclusive private hospital. The pain was distant, masked by powerful drugs, but he could feel the weight of severe injury in every breath. Dr. Rashid, the hospital's chief of neurosurgery, stood at his bedside reviewing charts. The man's expression told Sheikh Salam everything before he spoke a word. The diagnosis was delivered with professional compassion but unflinching honesty. Multiple fractures in both legs, severe spinal trauma, internal injuries that had required immediate surgery, but it was the prognosis that fell like a death sentence. Your Excellency, there is a 90% chance you will never walk again. The words echoed in the private room like bullets ricocheting off marble. Sheikh Salam closed his eyes, letting the full weight of this new reality settle over him. Everything he had built, his empire, his legacy, his very identity, seemed to shift beneath this new paradigm. Amina arrived within hours, designer heels clicking against hospital floors, diamonds catching the fluorescent light. Her face was arranged in an expression of appropriate concern, but her eyes were calculating. She had always been skilled at recognizing opportunity in crisis. "Habibi," she began, reaching for his hand. "When I heard, 'Don't,'" Sheikh Salam's voice was weak but firm. "We both know why you're here, Amina. Save your performance for someone who doesn't know you as well as I do." Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the hardness beneath. "You're injured, possibly crippled. You need me now more than ever. Think of appearances, of what people will say. I think of nothing but truth now." He turned his head to look at her fully. "The accident has taken my legs, but it's given me clarity. You're here to stake your claim, to use my weakness as leverage, just as you used your infertility as a weapon, just as you've used every advantage to maintain control. How dare you?" But there was no real outrage in her voice, only calculation. "I am still your wife in the eyes of society. I have rights. You have nothing." Sheikh Salam's words cut through her protests. "The papers were signed this afternoon just before the accident. You are no longer my wife, Amina, and this time there will be no negotiation, no compromise, no second chances." The change in her expression was instantaneous and chilling. Gone was any pretense of concern or affection, replaced by naked fury and contempt. So this is how it ends? You choose that American whore and her bastard over me? I choose truth over deception, honor over manipulation. And yes, I choose Serenity's honest sacrifice over your calculated cruelty. Amina's laugh was bitter and sharp. Sacrifice? Is that what you call selling her womb to the highest bidder? At least I brought class and connections to our marriage. She brings nothing but desperation and poverty. She brings integrity, something you have never understood. Sheikh Salam closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted. Leave, Amina. Your performance is over, and I have no strength for theatrics. You'll regret this. She moved to the door, her fury contained but palpable. When you're lying here, crippled and alone, you'll remember who stood by you for 20 years. Stood by me. His laugh turned into a grimace of pain. You stood by your own interests. Nothing more. Goodbye, Amina. May Allah grant you the wisdom to find peace with yourself. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the medical equipment. In the silence that followed, Sheikh Salam became aware of another presence. Serenity, standing quietly in the corner where she had witnessed the entire exchange. He hadn't noticed her enter, but her steady presence now felt like a balm after Amina's toxic energy. You don't have to stay, he said softly. The contract can be voided under these circumstances. You could return to America, to your sister. Serenity moved to his bedside, her movements gentle and unhurried. Is that what you want? What I want. He looked down at his legs, hidden beneath starched hospital sheets, but already feeling foreign and useless. What I want is irrelevant now. My condition changes everything. Does it? She sat in the chair Amina had disdained to use. The contract was about providing an heir, about securing a future. Has that changed? I will be a burden now, dependent, perhaps permanently disabled. You will be a father. Serenity's hand moved unconsciously to her growing belly. Everything else is just circumstance. Her simple declaration hung in the air between them, its truth more powerful than all of Amina's dramatic accusations. Sheikh Salam studied her face, young but wise beyond her years, beautiful in its honesty rather than calculation. Why would you choose to stay, to tie yourself to? He gestured at his broken body. Because you've shown me nothing but respect and kindness. Because you've given my sister opportunities she never dreamed possible. Because ... She smiled slightly. Because I believe that true nobility isn't about walking or standing, but about how we face life's challenges. Tears, the first he had allowed himself since the accident, slipped down Sheikh Salam's cheeks. Serenity pretended not to notice, maintaining his dignity even in this moment of weakness. Instead, she began telling him about Sarah's latest accomplishments at school, her voice soft and steady in the sterile hospital room. As night fell over Dubai, casting long shadows through the window, two people who had entered into a contract of convenience found themselves bound by something deeper, a shared understanding of sacrifice, honor, and the true meaning of nobility. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but in that quiet room, time seemed to slow, allowing space for new possibilities to take root and grow. The road ahead would be challenging. There would be surgeries, rehabilitation, adjustments to a new reality. But as Sheikh Salam drifted into an exhausted sleep, Serenity's quiet presence beside him offered more comfort than all of Amina's false devotion ever had. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from allowing someone else to stand with you. Chapter 7. True Colors. Amina's departure from Qasr al-Rahman occurred at precisely 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, orchestrated with the same theatrical precision that had characterized her entire life. A convoy of black Mercedes carried away her designer wardrobes, her jewelry collections, and the carefully curated facade she had maintained for 20 years. The palace staff lined the marble halls, faces carefully neutral as their former mistress made her final exit. Only after the last car disappeared through the ornate gates did subtle changes begin to ripple through the household. Shoulders relaxed, voices grew warmer, and smiles emerged like flowers after rain. Hassan, overseeing the transition with his usual efficiency, allowed himself a small sigh of relief as he watched decades of tension begin to dissolve. "She's really gone," one of the younger maids whispered in Arabic, hardly daring to believe it. "Yes," Hassan replied, his diplomatic mask slipping just enough to reveal satisfaction. "And now we have work to do." The work in question centered around two critical priorities: Sheikh Salam's rehabilitation and Serenity's expanding role in the household. The private wing of Dubai's premier medical center had become a second home, where days were marked by the rhythm of therapy sessions, medical consultations, and small victories measured in degrees of movement. Serenity's presence in the hospital was constant, her growing belly now visible beneath the modest clothing she had chosen to replace Amina's ill-fitting abayas. She attended every therapy session, learned each exercise, memorized medication schedules, and asked intelligent questions that impressed even the most experienced specialists. "The nerve damage is severe," Dr. Rashid explained during one consultation, pointing to detailed scans displayed on his tablet. "But not completely irreversible. With aggressive therapy and possibly additional surgery, we might see significant improvement. However," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "Your Excellency must understand that full recovery is still highly unlikely." Sheikh Salam, propped up in his hospital bed, absorbed this news with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout his ordeal. "What percentage of function might I regain?" "With optimal response to treatment, perhaps 30 to 40% mobility, enough to stand for short periods, possibly walk with assistance. But you would likely remain dependent on a wheelchair for most activities." Serenity, sitting beside the bed with her ever-present notebook, watched Sheikh Salam's face carefully. She had learned to read the subtle signs of his emotional state, the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated pain, the barely perceptible clench of his jaw that suggested frustration. "Then we focus on what can be improved," she said firmly, drawing both men's attention. 30% is better than 0. We work with what's possible and adapt to what isn't." Sheikh Salam's expression softened as he looked at her. "We. Yes, we." She met his gaze steadily. "Unless you're planning to fire me as your rehabilitation assistant." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I wasn't aware I had hired you for that position." "Consider it a contract extension." Her tone was light, but her eyes held conviction. "After all, I'm invested in ensuring my child's father can chase after them eventually." It was the first time either had openly acknowledged the deeper dimensions their arrangement had acquired. The moment hung between them, waited with unspoken understanding until Dr. Rashid tactfully cleared his throat. "The next phase of therapy will be challenging," he continued. "We'll need to begin more aggressive physical manipulation of the affected muscles. It will be painful, and progress will likely be frustratingly slow." "Pain I can handle," Sheikh Salam replied. "It's helplessness I struggle with." Serenity's hand moved unconsciously toward his, stopping just short of contact. "You're not helpless. You're healing. There's a difference." Back at the palace, changes continued to unfold. Under Hassan's guidance, Serenity began learning the complex mechanics of running a household that was effectively a small, corporate enterprise. She picked up essential Arabic phrases, learned the names and roles of every staff member, and began to understand the intricate social protocols that governed life in Dubai's highest circles. The staff, initially uncertain how to treat this young American who was neither wife nor servant, found themselves won over by her genuine warmth and unpretentious manner. Unlike Amina, who had wielded authority like a weapon, Serenity led with quiet competence and natural empathy. When she discovered that one of the gardeners had been working through a fever to avoid missing wages, she immediately arranged for paid sick leave and proper medical care. When the kitchen staff appeared anxious about preparing Western dishes for her, she joined them one evening to share her mother's recipes, turning the lesson into a cultural exchange that left everyone laughing. Her daily video calls with Sarah became bright spots in the routine of hospital visits and household management. The sisters shared updates, Sarah's academic achievements and social adventures balanced against carefully edited versions of life in Dubai. If Sarah noticed the hospital settings in the background of their calls, she didn't comment, accepting Serenity's vague explanations about working with medical staff as part of her mysterious job. One evening, about a week after Amina's departure, Serenity was reviewing household accounts in Sheikh Salam's hospital room when she noticed him watching her with an unreadable expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked, looking up from her tablet. "I'm trying to understand you," he replied honestly. "Most people in your position would have left after the accident. The contract could have been voided, as I offered. You could have taken the money already paid and returned to your sister. Instead, you've taken on responsibilities far beyond our original agreement, all while managing your pregnancy and dealing with the aftermath of Amina's presence." Serenity set aside the tablet, considering her words carefully. "When I first agreed to this arrangement, it was purely transactional. A baby, in exchange for Sarah's future. But life has a way of complicating simple equations. I've watched you treat everyone, from your highest executives to the youngest servant, with genuine respect. I've seen your patience during therapy, your determination to heal, your refusal to let injury break your spirit. How could I walk away from someone who has shown such strength?" "Strength?" He gestured to his legs, still immobile beneath the hospital sheets. "I can't even stand on my own." "Physical strength is only one kind of power." She moved to adjust his pillows, a task she had performed countless times now. "True strength lies in how we face adversity, in the dignity we maintain when life strips everything else away. You've shown me that every day since the accident." Sheikh Salam caught her hand as she withdrew, the first time he had initiated physical contact outside of therapy. "You've taught me something about strength as well. Your grace under Amina's cruelty, your dedication to your sister, your willingness to take on burdens that were never meant to be yours. These are also forms of power." Their eyes met in the dimness of the hospital room, an understanding passing between them that transcended their original contract. Here were two people who had entered into a business arrangement but found themselves bound by something deeper: mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of trust that can only be forged through adversity. The moment was interrupted by a nurse arriving for evening medications, but its impact lingered. As Serenity gathered her things to leave for the night, Sheikh Salam spoke again. "Thank you," he said simply, "for staying, for believing in possibility when others saw only limitation." "That's what partners do," she replied softly, and they both knew the word meant something different now than it had in their original contract. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Mornings began with therapy sessions, where Sheikh Salam fought for every millimeter of movement, while Serenity provided quiet encouragement and support. Afternoons were split between household management and medical consultations, with Serenity's own prenatal appointments woven into the schedule. The staff watched this evolution with approval, noting how their employer seemed to draw strength from Serenity's presence, how his determination in therapy increased when she was there to witness small victories. They observed the subtle ways she anticipated his needs, the respect with which she handled his moments of frustration, the genuine care that informed every interaction. Hassan, ever observant, saw what others might miss. The way Sheikh Salam's eyes followed Serenity when she moved around his room, how his face softened when she shared stories about Sarah, the protective concern he showed for her pregnancy even in the midst of his own struggles. The butler recognized the signs of something deeper than gratitude or obligation taking root. One particularly challenging therapy session ended with a breakthrough. Sheikh Salam managed to move his right foot slightly, the first voluntary movement below his knees since the accident. The medical team erupted in professional excitement, but it was Serenity's quiet, "I knew you could," that brought tears to the Sheikh's eyes. Later that evening, as she helped him settle back in his room, he caught a glimpse of their reflection in the window. Him in the wheelchair she had learned to manage with expert care, her standing beside him with one hand resting unconsciously on her growing belly. The image struck him with unexpected force, a tableau of resilience, of partnership forged in adversity, of hope growing in unlikely soil. "We make quite a pair," he said softly, more to himself than to her. Serenity heard him anyway. "Yes," she agreed, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "We do." As night fell over Dubai, casting the hospital room in shadows broken only by the city's eternal lights, two people who had begun as strangers bound by contract found themselves transformed by circumstance into something neither had anticipated. Their original agreement had been about creating new life, but in the process they had discovered something equally precious: the ability to help each other live more fully, more authentically, more hopefully than either had thought possible. The road ahead would still hold challenges. Physical therapy would continue to demand sweat and determination. The household would need constant attention. Their unusual situation would eventually require explanation to a curious world. But in that quiet moment, watching city lights paint patterns on hospital walls, both Sheikh Salam and Serenity knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, partners in a journey that had become far more meaningful than either had imagined possible. Chapter 8. The long night time in Dubai's premier medical center moved to its own rhythm, marked not by the traditional measures of days and weeks, but by the slow progress of healing and the gradual strengthening of unexpected bonds. Nights blended into days, therapy sessions into medical consultations, until the hospital room became a world unto itself, a crucible where two lives were being transformed through shared struggle and growing understanding. The room had evolved from its original sterile state. Sarah's artwork now brightened one wall, while traditional Arabic calligraphy adorned another, a gift from Hassan that read, "Patience is the key to joy." Medical equipment shared space with personal touches. A prayer rug carefully positioned to face Mecca, fresh flowers Serenity brought daily from the palace gardens, and a tablet that kept Sheikh Salam connected to his business empire even from his hospital bed. It was during these long nights that their relationship deepened beyond the boundaries of their original contract. When sleep proved elusive, they would talk for hours. Sheikh Salam shared stories of his childhood, of growing up with the weight of dynasty on his shoulders. Serenity spoke of her parents, of the accident that had forced her to become both sister and mother to Sarah at such a young age. "I remember the exact moment I realized they were gone," she said one night, her voice soft in the dim room. "I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, still wearing my soccer uniform from the game they'd been driving to watch. A police officer kept asking if there was anyone they could call, but all our relatives were back in Europe. I just kept thinking about Sarah. She was too young to understand what was happening, but somehow I had to explain that our whole world had changed." Sheikh Salam watched her from his bed, noting how she unconsciously cradled her growing belly as she spoke. "You were just a child yourself. I grew up that night." She smiled slightly. "Rather like you did when your father placed the future of your family's legacy in your hands at 18. The difference is that I had been prepared for that responsibility my entire life. You had no warning, no training for suddenly becoming a parent. Maybe that's why this doesn't feel as strange as it should." She gestured to encompass their current situation. "I'm used to life taking unexpected turns." Their conversations often turned philosophical in these quiet hours. They discussed faith, his deep-rooted Islamic beliefs, and her more fluid spirituality. They talked about culture, about the bridges and barriers between their different worlds. He taught her Arabic phrases beyond the basics she needed for the household, while she helped him understand American perspectives that had always puzzled him. The therapy sessions continued with grueling intensity. Small victories were celebrated like major triumphs. The first time Sheikh Salam managed to wiggle his toes consistently, the day he maintained sitting position without support for 5 minutes. The morning he moved his right leg voluntarily against resistance. Each achievement was hard-won through sweat, determination, and often pain. Serenity became an integral part of his rehabilitation team. She learned the exercises, understood the medical terminology, and developed an almost intuitive sense of when to push and when to provide gentle encouragement. Her own pregnancy progressed steadily, her belly growing more prominent as weeks passed, but she never used it as an excuse to slack in her support of his recovery. The medical staff observed their dynamic with professional interest. Dr. Rashid noted how Sheikh Salam's progress seemed to accelerate when Serenity was present, how her quiet confidence in his abilities often achieved better results than technical expertise alone. The physical therapists learned to schedule the most challenging sessions when she would be there, knowing her presence somehow made the impossible seem achievable. Late one night, after a particularly demanding therapy session that had left Sheikh Salam exhausted but triumphant, he watched Serenity arranging his medications for the next day. The dim lights caught the subtle curves of her pregnancy, now in its 6th month, and something tightened in his chest. "You should be resting," he said. The baby is fine." She smiled, one hand resting on her belly. "He's actually most active at night, rather like his father, working late hours." It was the first time she had referred to the child as his, rather than using the more clinical terms of their contract. The moment hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. "How do you know it's a boy?" he asked softly. "Just a feeling." She finished with the medications and moved to adjust his pillows, a routine they had perfected over weeks of practice. "Though I suppose we'll find out soon enough. The next ultrasound is scheduled for next week." "Will you—" He hesitated, then continued. "Would you mind if I attended?" Her hands stilled on the pillow. "You want to?" "Of course." His voice held a note of surprise. "It's my child, too, even if our arrangement is unconventional." Serenity sat in her usual chair beside his bed, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes I forget how unusual this all is. It's become so normal somehow. You, me, the baby, all of this." She gestured to encompass the hospital room, their shared routine, the life they had built around his recovery. "Normal is perhaps not the word most would use," he said with a slight smile. "But I understand what you mean. When I proposed this arrangement, I never imagined that you'd end up in a hospital bed with your surrogate playing nurse. That I'd find someone who could see past all of this," he gestured to his legs, "to who I am beneath the injury. Someone who understands duty and honor as more than just words." The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Serenity's heart. You're still the same man who offered a desperate girl a chance to secure her sister's future. The same man who treats everyone, from executives to cleaning staff, with equal respect. The wheelchair doesn't change who you are, doesn't it? His voice held an edge of bitterness. I can't walk, can't pray properly, can't even dress myself without assistance. The great Sheikh Salam, reduced to depending on others for basic needs. Dependence isn't weakness, she said firmly. It's human, and your strength isn't in your legs. It's in your heart, your mind, your spirit. Those are unchanged. He studied her face in the dim light, seeing the conviction in her eyes. How do you do that? Do what? Find the right words to make sense of chaos, to make limitation feel like possibility. Perhaps because I've learned that limitations often lead us to possibilities we never would have discovered otherwise. She smiled slightly. After all, if I hadn't been limited by poverty, I never would have taken a cleaning job at your office. If you hadn't been limited by your divorce contract, you never would have proposed our arrangement. Sometimes what seems like constraint becomes opportunity. Their conversation was interrupted by movement from within her belly, strong enough to be visible through her dress. Without thinking, she took Sheikh Salam's hand and placed it where the baby was kicking. His sharp intake of breath matched her own as they felt their child move between them. The moment crystallized everything that had changed. What had begun as a business transaction had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared struggle, and growing trust. The baby's movements beneath their joined hands seemed to underscore the reality that their lives were now inextricably linked. The next week brought new challenges and triumphs. Sheikh Salam managed his first assisted transfer from bed to wheelchair without the mechanical lift, a major milestone in his recovery. Serenity's ultrasound confirmed her intuition. They were indeed having a boy. The image of their son, clear on the medical screen, brought tears to both their eyes for different but complementary reasons. Palace life adapted to their evolving situation. Hassan orchestrated renovations to make the residence more wheelchair accessible while maintaining its elegant aesthetic. The staff, already won over by Serenity's leadership style, began to see her in a new light, not just as their employer's surrogate, but as someone who genuinely cared about their well-being and respected their culture. Late one night, as a desert storm raged outside the hospital windows, Sheikh Salam watched Serenity dozing in her chair. Her hand rested protectively over their growing child, her face peaceful despite the awkward position. In that moment, he realized that what had begun as a contract had become a covenant, a deeper commitment based not on legal obligations, but on shared values and mutual understanding. The road ahead would still hold challenges. His recovery would continue to demand patience and determination. Their unconventional situation would eventually require explanation to a curious world. But as lightning illuminated the Dubai skyline, Sheikh Salam al-Rahman felt a profound sense of peace. Sometimes, he realized, life's greatest blessings come disguised as its greatest challenges. In the long night of his recovery, he had found not just a mother for his child, but a partner who understood the true meaning of strength, honor, and resilience. As the storm outside began to fade, he offered a silent prayer of gratitude, not for the healing of his body, though that continued, but for the healing of his spirit that had come through the most unexpected source. Chapter 9. Freedom's Price. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, carried into Sheikh Salam's hospital room by his chief legal counsel, Mohammed al-Rashid. The document was thick with legal language, in both Arabic and English, its weight representing far more than mere paper and ink. It was the price of freedom, calculated in clauses, conditions, and carefully worded compromises. Serenity, now 7 months pregnant, sat quietly in her usual chair as Mohammed outlined the terms. Her presence had become so natural that even the conservative lawyer no longer questioned it. Besides, she had proven herself invaluable in managing both household and business matters during Sheikh Salam's recovery. Amina's lawyers have been, Mohammed chose his words carefully, aggressive in their demands. They're attempting to leverage your current condition to maximize their position. Sheikh Salam's laugh held no humor. Of course they are. What exactly does my ex-wife want for her silence about my shame? The list was extensive. Properties in Dubai and Europe, substantial shares in several key businesses, seats on various boards of directors, and financial compensation that would make even some royal divorces seem modest. But it was the final demand that caused both men to exchange worried glances. She wants proof, Mohammed said quietly, that your arrangement with Miss Matthews is purely contractual. She threatens to expose what she calls the American scandal unless we provide documentation that there is no emotional involvement. Serenity's hand moved instinctively to her belly, where their son had just kicked. The movement didn't go unnoticed by Sheikh Salam, whose face hardened with resolve. Enough, he said, his voice carrying the authority that injury hadn't diminished. I've spent 20 years letting Amina dictate terms through manipulation and threats. No more. Mohammed, prepare our counteroffer. Over the next hour, Sheikh Salam outlined his position. Yes, Amina would receive fair compensation. He was not vindictive. But it would be on his terms based on their original marriage contract and nothing more. Any attempts to disparage Serenity or question the legitimacy of his heir would result in the full disclosure of Amina's own deceptions, including medical records proving she had entered their marriage fraudulently. But sir, Mohammed protested, her family's influence is substantial but not unlimited. Sheikh Salam's voice was firm. More importantly, they value appearance above all. Amina's deception, if revealed, would damage their standing far more than any scandal she might fabricate about my current situation. As Mohammed left with his new instructions, Serenity remained quiet, processing the implications of what she had heard. Finally, she spoke. She really hates me, doesn't she? No, Sheikh Salam replied thoughtfully. She hates what you represent. Authenticity in a world built on appearances, strength found in vulnerability rather than power. You threaten everything she believes about how the world should work. The next few weeks became a complex dance of legal maneuvers and social calculations. Amina's lawyers pushed back, threatened, then gradually began to retreat as Sheikh Salam's position remained firm. His recovery continued to progress. He could now manage short periods of standing with support, while Serenity's pregnancy advanced without complications. Word of the divorce negotiations inevitably leaked into Dubai's high society, generating waves of speculation and gossip. The presence of a pregnant American woman in Sheikh Salam's household added fuel to the rumors, though Hassan's efficient management kept most details private. One evening, as Serenity helped Sheikh Salam with his evening therapy exercises, he broached the subject that had been weighing on both their minds. The lawyers say we need to address the succession question directly, he said, carefully moving his legs as she had shown him. The baby's legitimacy must be established beyond any doubt. Serenity's hands were steady as she supported his movements. I assumed there would be legal proceedings after the birth. That may be too late. Amina's threats have forced us to be more proactive. He paused, gathering his thoughts. There's a solution, but I won't suggest it without your full understanding and consent. She met his eyes, reading the complexity of emotions there. Tell me. Marriage. The word hung in the air between them. Not the traditional kind, I would never presume, but a legal arrangement that would protect both you and the child from any future challenges. Serenity sat back, one hand resting on her prominent belly. Another contract? Yes and no. Sheikh Salam reached for her hand, a gesture that had become natural over their months together. Legally, it would be a marriage of convenience, ensuring our son's position and your security. But he hesitated, then continued with characteristic honesty. I find myself hoping it might be more. The admission surprised them both. Their relationship had evolved far beyond their original agreement, but neither had dared put words to the subtle shift in their feelings. Now, forced by circumstance to address their future directly, they found themselves at another crossroads. I won't make the same mistake as my first marriage, Sheikh Salam continued, when Serenity remained silent. No hidden agendas, no manipulative clauses, just truth, that we care for each other, that we both want what's best for our child, that we've found something valuable in our time together. Serenity looked down at their joined hands, thinking of their journey from that first meeting in his Philadelphia office to this moment. What about your recovery? The business pressures, the social complications? All challenges we've already faced together. His voice softened. You've seen me at my weakest and helped make me strong again. You've managed both household and business matters with grace and wisdom. You've earned the respect of my staff and demonstrated understanding of our culture. What better foundation could we have? Before she could respond, a knock at the door announced Dr. Rashid's evening rounds. The conversation paused, but its implications continued to resonate. Over the next few days, as divorce negotiations reached their final stages, Serenity found herself examining her feelings with ruthless honesty. She loved Sarah. That had been her driving force from the beginning. She respected Sheikh Salam, that had grown through witnessing his dignity in adversity. But somewhere along the way, respect had deepened into something more complex. His integrity, his kindness, his determination to rebuild his life on truth rather than appearances, these qualities had touched her heart in unexpected ways. The final divorce agreement was signed on a Sunday, chosen for its auspicious associations in Islamic tradition. Amina received generous compensation, but far less than she had demanded. More importantly, she was legally bound to silence regarding both Sheikh Salam's injury and Serenity's presence in his household. That evening, as the setting sun painted Dubai's skyline in shades of gold, Serenity and Sheikh Salam sat in the hospital's private garden. His therapy had progressed enough to allow short excursions in his wheelchair, and they had developed a habit of ending difficult days in this peaceful space. "It's really over," Serenity said softly, watching the play of light on the fountain's waters. "The divorce, yes." Sheikh Salam's voice held a note of question. "But perhaps something else is beginning." She turned to face him fully. "Are you sure about this? Marriage, even one of convenience, is a huge step. The cultural differences, the social pressures. I'm sure about you." His directness, as always, cut through complications to truth. "I'm sure about the strength we've found together, about the future we could build. The question is, are you sure?" Serenity looked out over the garden, where desert blooms defied the odds to create beauty in harsh conditions, rather like their own unlikely partnership, she thought. "I need to tell Sarah first," she said finally. "She deserves to understand why her sister is choosing to build a life halfway around the world from her." "Of course." His smile held understanding. "Family comes first. You taught me that." The words triggered something in Serenity's heart, a recognition of how much they had already become a family, not through contracts or convenience, but through shared struggles and mutual support. Their son kicked strongly, as if adding his opinion to the discussion. "Yes," she said simply, turning back to meet his gaze. "Yes to marriage, to building something real, from what began as convenience, yes, to facing whatever comes next together. Sheikh Salam reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture of respect and tenderness that transcended cultural boundaries. No words were needed. They had learned to read each other's silence as clearly as speech. As night fell over Dubai, bringing the first cool breezes of evening, two people who had begun as strangers bound by contract found themselves choosing to be bound by something far stronger: trust built through adversity, respect earned through action, and love grown in the most unexpected garden. The price of freedom, they both realized, wasn't measured in the legal documents signed that day. It was in the courage to embrace truth over appearance, substance over form, and the possibility of real partnership over the safety of convenient arrangements. As the stars emerged above the hospital garden, their light seemed to bless the choice that would change not just their lives, but the lives of all those connected to them. Chapter 10. Hope's Dawn. The morning edition of the Dubai Medical Journal sat unopened on Sheikh Salam's hospital table, its presence unremarkable among the daily papers and business reports that kept him connected to the world beyond his recovery. It was Serenity, reviewing medical literature during one of their quiet afternoons, who first noticed the article that would change everything. Professor Andreas Hufnagel, she read aloud, her voice growing excited, leading neurosurgical specialist from Germany's Heidelberg University Hospital, revolutionary approach to spinal cord regeneration, success rates unprecedented in cases previously considered permanent. Sheikh Salam looked up from his tablet, catching the spark of hope in her eyes. After months of rehabilitation, they had settled into acceptance of his limited mobility, focusing on maximizing function within known constraints. But now— "Let me see that," he requested, reaching for the journal. The article detailed Professor Hufnagel's innovative combination of surgical techniques and stem cell therapy, supported by case studies that seemed almost miraculous. Patients with severe spinal cord injuries regaining significant function, some even walking again, with minimal assistance. "It says he's coming to Dubai next month for a medical conference," Serenity noted, already reaching for her phone to make notes. "We should try to arrange a consultation." The wheels were set in motion with characteristic efficiency. Hassan coordinated with the conference organizers, while Sheikh Salam's medical team compiled his complete case file for review. Within days, they had secured a preliminary appointment during the professor's visit. Professor Hufnagel proved to be a tall, distinguished man with kind eyes and the precise manner of a seasoned surgeon. He reviewed Sheikh Salam's medical records thoroughly before performing his own examination, his experienced hands gentle but thorough as he assessed nerve function and muscle response. "The injury is severe," he acknowledged, speaking in fluent English with a slight German accent. "But not beyond help. The location and nature of the trauma," he pointed to specific areas on the MRI scans, "make you an excellent candidate for our new procedure." Hope, so long carefully contained, began to stir in Sheikh Salam's chest. "You believe I could walk again? With extensive rehabilitation, yes. The procedure involves multiple stages: microsurgery to repair damaged neural pathways, stem cell implantation to promote regeneration, and then intensive physical therapy. The recovery period is long and demanding, but our success rate in similar cases is very promising." Serenity, sitting beside Sheikh Salam's bed with her ever-present notebook, asked detailed questions about risks, recovery protocols, and long-term prognosis. Her own pregnancy was now in its 8th month, making her presence even more remarkable as she focused entirely on his potential treatment. "The surgery would need to be performed in Germany," Professor Hufnagel explained. Our facilities at Heidelberg are specifically equipped for this procedure. The initial surgery would require approximately 12 hours, followed by several months of specialized rehabilitation. The logistics were daunting, but not insurmountable. Sheikh Salam's business empire could be managed remotely, and the household was already running smoothly under Serenity's guidance. The real challenge would be timing, with their baby due in weeks and their marriage plans pending. Adding major surgery to the equation seemed almost impossible. That evening, after Professor Hufnagel had left with promises to send detailed protocols, Sheikh Salam and Serenity sat in thoughtful silence. The Dubai skyline glittered beyond the hospital windows, a testament to human ambition and the power of believing in possibilities. "We should do it," Serenity said finally, "as soon as possible after the baby comes." "You've just agreed to marry me," Sheikh Salam reminded her gently. "Now you'd have me disappear to Germany for months of surgery and rehabilitation?" "I agreed to marry you because I believe in us, in what we can build together. This treatment, it's not just about walking again. It's about giving our son a father who can chase him through the palace gardens, who can teach him to ride horses, who can stand beside him at his own wedding someday." Tears, still rare despite their growing closeness, gleamed in Sheikh Salam's eyes. "And what about you? Caring for a newborn while managing the household, dealing with social obligations, supporting my recovery from across continents." "I'm stronger than you think," she smiled, taking his hand. "Besides, I have something you didn't have during your previous recovery. Someone who loves you, not despite your challenges, but because of how you face them." The word love hung between them, spoken aloud for the first time. Sheikh Salam brought her hand to his lips, a gesture that had become natural but never lost its meaning. "When did you know," he asked softly, "that I loved you?" Serenity considered, one hand resting on her rounded belly, where their son moved restlessly. "I think it was gradual. Watching your determination in therapy, seeing your kindness to the staff, experiencing your respect for my independence. But maybe I realized it fully the day you offered to let me out of our contract after the accident. You were willing to sacrifice your dreams to spare me difficulty. That's when I knew I couldn't leave." "For me," he replied, "it was the night you fought with Dr. Rashid about my medication schedule, insisting that his standard protocol wasn't accounting for my specific symptoms. You were so fierce, so certain, so focused on my well-being. I saw myself through your eyes and felt worthy again, not despite my injury, but as a whole person." The moment was interrupted by a kick from their unborn son, strong enough to be visible through Serenity's dress. They both laughed, the serious mood lightening. "He's definitely your child," Serenity said, guiding Sheikh Salam's hand to feel the movement. "Always making his presence known at important moments." The next weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Professor Hufnagel's team sent detailed pre-operative protocols, while Sheikh Salam's business managers prepared for his extended absence. The palace staff, under Hassan's direction, began adapting spaces for both the coming baby and their employer's eventual return, with different mobility needs. The most challenging conversation was with Sarah. Serenity had been gradually preparing her sister for changes, but now it was time for full honesty. The video call was emotional, but ultimately healing. "You love him?" Sarah asked directly, her young face serious on the screen. "Yes," Serenity answered simply, "not part of the original plan, but sometimes life knows better than we do." "And he loves you back? This isn't just about the baby?" "He does." Sheikh Salam moved into view of the camera, looking Sarah in the eyes. "Your sister has given me far more than we agreed to in our original contract. She's given me hope, strength, and a reason to fight for recovery. I promise you, Sarah, I will spend my life trying to be worthy of her faith in me." Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but I get to be maid of honor at the wedding." The surgery was scheduled for 3 months after the baby's due date, time enough for Serenity to recover from childbirth and for their son to be strong enough for travel. The plan was detailed. Sheikh Salam would undergo the procedure in Heidelberg, with Serenity and the baby joining him 2 weeks later, once initial post-operative healing was complete. As the pieces fell into place, a sense of anticipation began to replace anxiety. Each sunset brought them closer to multiple new beginnings: their son's birth, their marriage, and now the possibility of Sheikh Salam walking again. The challenges ahead were significant, but they had learned to face uncertainty together. One night, unable to sleep, they sat in the hospital's garden under a canopy of stars. The air was cool, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine from carefully tended beds. Sheikh Salam reached out to touch Serenity's belly, feeling their son move beneath his hand. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "Of the surgery?" "A little." His honesty, as always, was refreshing. "But I'm more afraid of not trying, of telling our son someday that I had a chance to be whole for him, but was too scared to take it." "You're already whole." Serenity covered his hand with hers. "The surgery won't change who you are. It will just give you more ways to show it." His smile in the darkness held all the love and gratitude he felt for this remarkable woman who had entered his life through a business arrangement and transformed it through the power of genuine care. "When I walk again," he said with quiet certainty, "my first steps will be to you." The promise hung in the garden air like a prayer, witnessed by stars that had seen countless human dreams rise and fall. But this dream felt different, built on a foundation of trust, supported by medical science and fueled by a love that had grown in the most unexpected circumstances. As they sat together in the peaceful garden, both knew that whatever the outcome of the surgery, they had already achieved something remarkable. They had transformed a contract into a covenant, convenience into commitment, and what began as a business arrangement into a partnership strong enough to face any challenge. The dawn was still hours away, but hope had already begun to paint the sky with possibilities. Chapter 11. Learning to Dance. Dawn broke over Dubai with exceptional splendor on the morning of Sheikh Salam and Serenity's wedding. The sun painted the city's towers in shades of rose and gold, as if nature itself wished to bless the union that would bridge two cultures, two worlds, and two hearts that had found each other in the most unexpected circumstances. The palace had been transformed into a wonderland that honored both Eastern and Western traditions. The grand courtyard, where the main ceremony would take place, featured elegant Arabic calligraphy alongside delicate white roses. Flowing fountains created a melodic backdrop, while traditional lanterns waited to cast their gentle glow as evening approached. In her preparation chamber, Serenity sat before an ornate mirror, while skilled hands worked to create her bridal look. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of fusion design. Traditional Western white silk overlaid with intricate Arabic embroidery in gold thread. The design cleverly accommodated her 8-month pregnancy, making her look more regal than expectant. Sarah, who had flown in from Pennsylvania the previous week, watched the proceedings with wide-eyed wonder. At 11, she had grown taller and more poised during her time at boarding school, but her excitement was purely childlike as she observed her sister's transformation. "You look like a princess," she breathed, touching the delicate veil with careful fingers, "like something from Mom's fairy tale books." Serenity caught her sister's hand, squeezing it gently. "Mom and Dad would have loved this day. They would have loved him too, I think, because he makes you happy." Sarah's perception, as always, went straight to the heart of things. Because he sees me, really sees me, and because he understands what family means. Serenity's free hand rested on her rounded belly, where their son moved as if sensing the day's significance. In another wing of the palace, Sheikh Salam prepared with equal care. His traditional thobe was immaculate, the bisht that would cover it woven with gold thread that matched Serenity's embroidery. Hassan helped him dress with the efficiency of long practice, though today's routine carried special meaning. "The guests are arriving, Your Excellency," Hassan reported as he adjusted the bisht's fall over Sheikh Salam's wheelchair, including Professor Hufnagel and his team. The German surgeon had arrived early to conduct final pre-operative assessments before the wedding. In 2 weeks, they would all travel to Heidelberg for the surgery that promised new possibilities. But today was about celebrating love that had grown despite, or perhaps because of, life's challenges. The ceremony itself was a carefully choreographed blend of traditions. An imam led the Islamic provisions, while a Western officiant incorporated elements meaningful to Serenity's background. The couple had written their own vows, another departure from tradition that somehow felt perfectly right. When Serenity entered the courtyard on Hassan's arm, standing in for her father, the gathered assembly fell silent in appreciation. She moved with natural grace despite her pregnancy, her face glowing with joy beneath the delicate veil. Sheikh Salam, waiting beside the flower-draped arch, felt his heart swell with emotions too profound for words. Their vows, spoken in both English and Arabic, reflected the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I choose you," Sheikh Salam began, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed courtyard, "not because of any contract or obligation, but because you taught me that true strength lies in vulnerability, true nobility in how we face life's challenges. You saw me at my weakest and helped make me strong again. You offered honest care when others gave false loyalty. You showed me that love isn't about perfection, but about perfect acceptance." Serenity's voice trembled slightly as she responded. "I choose you because you showed me that honor isn't just a word, but a way of living. You offered opportunity without demanding submission, respect without expecting subservience. You helped me give my sister a future while allowing me to discover my own. In you, I found not just security but partnership, not just kindness but understanding, not just acceptance but celebration of who I am." The exchange of rings carried deep symbolism. His, a band of platinum engraved with Arabic scripture about faith and love. Hers, a delicate creation that incorporated both diamonds and traditional Islamic patterns. As they were pronounced husband and wife, the gathering erupted in jubilant celebration, mixing Western applause with traditional Middle Eastern ululation. The reception that followed was a feast for all senses. Traditional Arabic dishes shared space with Western favorites, while musicians alternated between classical Middle Eastern melodies and contemporary songs. Sarah, officially the youngest guest but unofficially the heart of the celebration, flitted between groups with natural charm, equally at ease with Dubai's elite and the palace staff who had become her extended family. As evening approached, the courtyard was transformed by the glow of countless lanterns. Sheikh Salam and Serenity sat together beneath a canopy of twinkling lights, receiving guests and sharing quiet moments between formal obligations. Their hands remained clasped, his thumb occasionally brushing over her ring in a gesture that had already become habit. Professor Hufnagel approached during a quiet moment, offering both congratulations and reassurance about the upcoming surgery. "Your recovery has been remarkable," he noted, reviewing Sheikh Salam's latest progress. "The strength you've built will serve you well during rehabilitation." "He has excellent motivation," Serenity smiled, one hand resting on her belly where their son moved restlessly. 2 weeks until we begin the next chapter of our journey. The professor's eyes twinkled. Perhaps 3 miracles then. Love, new life, and new beginnings. As the celebration continued around them, Sheikh Salam and Serenity found moments to share private thoughts and quiet jokes. They had discovered early in their relationship that sometimes the most profound communication required no words at all. "Look," Serenity whispered at one point, gesturing to where Sarah was teaching some of the younger guests a traditional American dance while simultaneously learning Arabic phrases from them. "Bridges being built already." Sheikh Salam squeezed her hand. "She takes after her sister, natural diplomacy." The night's most touching moment came when Sarah insisted on a special presentation. She had worked with the palace staff to create a video montage combining pictures from both families' histories. Images of Serenity and Sarah's parents dissolved into photos of Sheikh Salam's family, while recent pictures showed the growing connection between all their worlds. "Because family," Sarah announced with simple eloquence, "isn't about where you come from, but where you choose to belong." Tears flowed freely during the presentation, not just from the newlyweds, but from many of the guests. Even Hassan was seen discreetly wiping his eyes, though he would later deny it firmly. As the evening drew to a close, Sheikh Salam and Serenity retired to their private wing, now redesigned to accommodate both his current needs and future rehabilitation. The space reflected their shared life, his traditional artifacts displayed alongside her family photos, medical equipment discreetly integrated with luxury furnishings, everything arranged to support both recovery and romance. "Happy?" Sheikh Salam asked, as Hassan helped him transfer from his wheelchair to their bed. "Beyond words," Serenity replied, carefully settling beside him. Their son kicked vigorously, making them both laugh. "I think someone else is celebrating too." They talked quietly about the day's highlights, Sarah's natural charm with the guests, Hassan's barely concealed emotions, the successful blending of traditions. But underlying the conversation was awareness of what lay ahead, the surgery in Germany, the birth of their son, the long rehabilitation process. "Are you afraid?" Serenity asked softly, echoing a question from their garden conversation weeks ago. "Of surgery?" "No." Sheikh Salam drew her closer, his hand resting protectively over their child. "The only fear I had was of facing life alone. You've taken that fear away. We're stronger together," she murmured, sleep beginning to blur her words. "Always have been." As Dubai's lights twinkled beyond their windows, 2 people who had begun as strangers bound by contract rested in the peace of genuine partnership. Their journey ahead would hold challenges, medical procedures, cultural adjustments, the adventures of parenthood. But they had learned that life's greatest dances often begin with unexpected partners, and that true grace comes not from perfect steps, but from moving together through whatever music plays. Chapter 12. A new beginning dawn was breaking over Dubai when Sheikh Salam's private jet began its taxi to the runway. The city he had helped build glowed golden in the early light, its towers reaching skyward like prayers made manifest in steel and glass. In the luxury cabin, converted to accommodate his medical needs, he held Serenity's hand as they prepared for their first separation since the accident. 2 weeks, she reminded him, her voice steady despite the tears she wouldn't let fall. "Just 2 weeks until I join you in Heidelberg." The medical team traveling with him, a combination of his Dubai doctors and Professor Hufnagel's advanced staff, busied themselves with equipment checks, tactfully giving the couple privacy for their goodbye. At 8.5 months pregnant, Serenity had been advised against the long flight, planning instead to follow after Sheikh Salam's initial recovery period. "Promise me you'll rest," he said, touching her rounded belly where their son moved restlessly. Let Hassan handle everything except the essential decisions. I promise. She smiled, knowing they both understood she would remain involved in every aspect of his care, even from a distance. Just focus on getting stronger. We'll be there before you know it. The goodbye was interrupted by the flight crew's final preparations, but they had already said everything important in the quiet hours of the previous night. As Serenity stepped off the plane, she turned for one last look. Sheikh Salam watched her until she disappeared into the private terminal, carrying part of his heart with her. The flight to Germany passed in a blend of medical monitoring and business communications. Sheikh Salam had arranged for critical operations to continue under trusted management, but certain decisions still required his attention. It was a welcome distraction from the magnitude of what lay ahead. Heidelberg University Hospital rose from carefully maintained grounds, its modern medical facilities balanced by historic architecture. Professor Hufnagel greeted them personally, his commanding presence somehow reassuring as he supervised Sheikh Salam's transfer to the specialized neurosurgery unit. "We begin comprehensive testing tomorrow," the professor explained, reviewing monitors already tracking vital signs. "The surgery is scheduled for the day after. Everything is prepared." The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of examinations, final imaging studies, and detailed discussions of the procedure. Sheikh Salam appreciated the German medical team's precise approach, their confidence tempered by appropriate caution. Each specialist knew their role in the complex surgery that would attempt to repair his damaged spine. Through it all, technology kept him connected to Dubai. Serenity's face on video calls became his anchor, her voice steady as she reviewed medical details with his doctors, shared updates about palace operations, and most importantly, simply talked about normal things. Sarah's latest letter, the garden's new blooms, their son's increasing activity. The night before surgery, after completing the required religious observations with a local imam, Sheikh Salam found himself unable to sleep. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft hum of medical equipment. The view of Heidelberg's historic castle illuminated against the night sky, providing a dramatic backdrop for reflection. His video call with Serenity lasted hours, neither wanting to disconnect. She had arranged her schedule to match his time zone, determined to be present in whatever way possible during this crucial period. "Tell me again about the nursery changes," he requested, needing to focus on future joy rather than immediate challenges. Serenity's camera followed her as she walked through the newly completed space, showing the careful blend of traditional Arabic and modern elements they had chosen together. The crib arrived yesterday, hand-carved by the same artisan who made your father's. And look, the ceiling stars I told you about. The projection of constellations on the nursery ceiling sparkled gently, programmed to match the real night sky. For our son to learn both the Western stars I grew up with and the patterns that guided Arab traders for centuries, she explained, her voice soft with meaning. Morning arrived too quickly, bringing with it the practiced efficiency of a major teaching hospital preparing for complex surgery. As orderlies transferred Sheikh Salam to a surgical gurney, Professor Hufnagel arrived for final confirmations. "The procedure will take approximately 12 hours, he reminded them during the last video call with Serenity. "We will update your family every 2 hours, sooner if there are significant developments." Serenity's face on the screen showed the strength Sheikh Salam had come to rely on. "We believe in you, both of you. The next time we speak, Habibi, you'll be starting your journey to walk again." The operating theater was a study in controlled precision. Multiple teams worked in choreographed sequence. Neurosurgeons, orthopedic specialists, microsurgery experts. Hour after hour, They carefully repaired damaged nerve pathways, stabilized vertebrae, and implanted stem cells designed to promote regeneration. In Dubai, Serenity maintained her own vigil. Hassan had arranged for her to rest in Sheikh Salam's private office, where she could monitor the regular updates from Heidelberg while managing essential palace operations. Sarah, connected via tablet from her boarding school, provided steady companionship between classes. The surgery stretched beyond its estimated 12 hours as Professor Hufnagel's team encountered and addressed unexpected complications. Each update from the operating room was carefully worded, balancing honesty with hope. Serenity received them with outward calm, though her hands often strayed to her belly, where their son moved restlessly, as if sensing the significance of the day. Finally, nearly 15 hours after it began, the procedure was complete. Professor Hufnagel himself delivered the news via video call, his surgical cap still in place. The surgery was successful, he reported with cautious optimism. We achieved everything we hoped to accomplish. Now we wait for healing to begin. Sheikh Salam spent the next 3 days in intensive care, his body beginning the complex process of accepting and integrating the surgical interventions. Modern medicine mixed with ancient prayers as he drifted between sedation and wakefulness, each moment of consciousness anchored by Serenity's voice through video calls. On the 4th day, as morning light painted Heidelberg's ancient castle in shades of gold, Sheikh Salam felt something he hadn't experienced since the accident, a definite controllable tingling in his right foot. The sensation was faint, more promise than achievement, but its significance brought tears to his eyes. "It's real," he told Serenity during their morning call. "Different from the phantom sensations before. I can feel it respond when they touch my foot." Her joy matched his own, though she tempered her reaction with characteristic wisdom. "The first step of many," she reminded him. "We celebrate this victory and prepare for the work ahead." The next week brought small but significant progress. Sensation gradually returned to both legs, though movement remained minimal. The medical team began passive range of motion exercises, carefully monitoring his body's responses. Each small improvement was documented and shared with Dubai, where Serenity maintained her own detailed records. 10 days after surgery, as Sheikh Salam worked through his morning therapy exercises, Professor Hufnagel arrived with unexpected news. "Your wife's doctor in Dubai called. The baby is showing signs of arriving early. Nothing concerning," he added quickly, seeing his patient's alarm, "but they recommend she travel now, rather than risk being unable to fly later." Within hours, Sheikh Salam's private jet was heading back to Dubai, this time to collect precious cargo. Serenity, escorted by her medical team and Hassan's efficient staff, began the journey to Heidelberg. Modern technology allowed her to monitor Sheikh Salam's therapy sessions even during the flight, their connection maintained across continents. The reunion, when it finally happened, left the usually composed hospital staff misty-eyed. Sheikh Salam, sitting up in bed with new strength in his upper body, reached for Serenity with hands that trembled slightly. She came into his arms carefully, her advanced pregnancy requiring gentle maneuvering, but the embrace held all the emotion of their weeks apart. "Welcome home," he whispered, though they were thousands of miles from Dubai. "Home is wherever we're together," she replied, guiding his hand to feel their son's movements. "All of us." As night fell over Heidelberg, painting the historic city in shades of purple and gold, two people who had begun as strangers bound by contract found themselves bound by something far stronger. Love tested by separation, strengthened by challenge, and now renewed by reunion. In a modern hospital room, surrounded by medical technology and overlooking ancient stone walls, they began planning the next phase of their journey together. Their son, as if celebrating the reunion, moved vigorously beneath their joined hands. The future held more challenges. Intensive rehabilitation, the imminent birth, the gradual return to Dubai. But they had learned that the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from supporting each other through every step of life's dance. Chapter 13. Double Blessing. The first signs of labor began during a peaceful evening in Heidelberg. Serenity had been sitting beside Sheikh Salam's hospital bed, reviewing his latest therapy progress, when she felt the initial contractions. Having experienced Braxton Hicks contractions before, she initially dismissed the discomfort, but something felt different this time. Sheikh Salam, whose sensitivity to her had grown even keener during their time in Germany, noticed her slight wince. "What is it?" "Probably nothing," she started to say, but another contraction, stronger than the first, made her pause. Or maybe everything. The hospital's maternity wing had been prepared for this possibility since her arrival. Within minutes, Serenity's medical team was assembled, working in coordination with Sheikh Salam's rehabilitation staff to ensure both parents could be together despite his ongoing recovery. Dr. Elena Reber, the chief obstetrician who had been monitoring Serenity since her arrival in Germany, conducted the initial examination. Her expression changed subtly as she studied the ultrasound screen, calling for a colleague to verify her findings. "What's wrong?" Serenity asked, recognizing the focused concentration in the doctor's face. "Not wrong, Doctor," Weber replied carefully, "but unexpected. We're detecting two distinct heartbeats." The news struck like lightning in clear sky. Twins. Sheikh Salam's voice held wonder and concern in equal measure. But all the previous scans. One baby was hiding behind the other. The doctor explained, pointing to the screen. "It happens sometimes, especially when one twin is slightly smaller, but both appear healthy and in good position." The revelation added new urgency to the proceedings. Twin births could be more complicated, and Serenity's medical team quickly adjusted their plans. Sheikh Salam, supported by his physiotherapist, was positioned near the bed in his wheelchair, determined to be fully present for this moment. Labor progressed with the unpredictable rhythm common to all births, but particularly challenging with twins. Serenity, who had faced every challenge in their journey with remarkable strength, found herself drawing on reserves she didn't know she possessed. Sheikh Salam remained her anchor, his hand steady in hers despite his own ongoing recovery. Sarah, connected via video call from her boarding school in Pennsylvania, provided encouragement between contractions. Hassan, coordinating between Heidelberg and Dubai, ensured that all necessary arrangements were modified to accommodate not one, but two royal babies. The first twin, a boy, arrived just after midnight, announcing his presence with a lusty cry that brought tears to both parents' eyes. But there was little time to celebrate as the medical team focused on delivering his sister, who followed 7 minutes later with equal vigor. "A son and a daughter," Sheikh Salam whispered, overwhelmed by the perfection of the moment. "Allah has truly blessed us twice over." The twins were placed on Serenity's chest, their newborn faces still bearing the marks of their journey into the world. The boy, slightly larger than his sister, had his father's strong features softened by his mother's coloring. The girl was more delicate, with darker skin that hinted at her Arabic heritage. "They're beautiful," Sarah's voice came through the tablet, thick with emotion. "I'm an aunt twice." The next hours passed in a blur of medical checks, first feedings, and the countless small moments that marked the beginning of new life. The hospital staff, accustomed to caring for both Sheikh Salam's rehabilitation and Serenity's pregnancy, now found themselves coordinating care for 4 patients instead of 2. Traditional Arabic customs were observed even in this modern German hospital. The first words whispered in each baby's ear were verses from the Quran, performed by the same imam who had supported Sheikh Salam through his surgery. Western traditions were honored too, with Sarah leading the singing of an English lullaby via video call. The naming ceremony, held when the twins were 7 days old, reflected the beautiful blend of cultures that had brought them into being. The boy was named Karim, meaning generous in Arabic, with the middle name Alexander after Serenity's father. The girl became Noor, meaning light in Arabic, with Grace as her middle name in honor of Serenity's mother. Sheikh Salam's recovery took on new motivation as he watched his children grow stronger each day. His rehabilitation sessions became more intense, driven by the desire to hold his children without assistance. The first time he managed to support Karim's weight alone, though still seated, was celebrated as enthusiastically as any medical breakthrough. Serenity recovered quickly from the birth, soon establishing a routine that balanced the twins' needs with supporting her husband's continued healing. The hospital staff watched in amazement as she moved between roles, mother, wife, rehabilitation partner, with natural grace. Sarah arrived from Pennsylvania 2 weeks after the births, her school having granted special leave for this extraordinary circumstance. Her presence brought new energy to the family unit, her natural ability with the twins proving that nurturing ran strong in the Matthews genes. "They're so perfect," she whispered one evening, watching the twins sleep in their hospital nursery, "like they were always meant to be part of our family." The weeks that followed established new patterns. Sheikh Salam's therapy continued to show promising results, with sensation and movement returning gradually to his legs. The twins thrived, their distinct personalities emerging early, Karim curious and active, Noor more contemplative but equally determined. Hospital staff began referring to them as the miracle family, noting how Sheikh Salam's recovery seemed to accelerate with each milestone his children reached. The first time he managed to stand with support coincided with Karim's first real smile. His first steps in parallel bars came the day Noor first tracked a moving object with her eyes. One particularly memorable evening, as summer began to fade into autumn, the family gathered in Sheikh Salam's private hospital suite. The twins lay on a blanket between their parents, while Sarah sat cross-legged nearby, entertaining them with soft songs. Through the windows, Heidelberg Castle glowed in the setting sun, its ancient stones a reminder of how love stories had unfolded in this city for centuries. "Did you ever imagine this?" Serenity asked softly, watching Sheikh Salam reach down from his wheelchair to touch Noor's cheek. His movement was stronger now, more controlled, a testament to his dedication to rehabilitation. "Not in my wildest dreams," he replied honestly. "When I first proposed our arrangement, I thought I was seeking an heir. Instead, I found a family." The twins, as if sensing the emotional weight of the moment, chose that time to demonstrate their growing personalities. Karim attempted to roll over, a feat he hadn't quite mastered yet, while Noor made the soft cooing sounds that were becoming her trademark. Sarah, who had grown noticeably more mature during her time with the family, smiled wisely. "Maybe this is what Mom and Dad meant about everything happening for a reason. All the hard stuff led us here." The truth of her words settled over the room like a blessing. Every challenge they had faced, Serenity's early struggles with Sarah, Sheikh Salam's accident and recovery, their unconventional beginning, had created the foundation for this moment of perfect completeness. As night fell over Heidelberg, casting long shadows through the hospital windows, the family remained together in peaceful communion. The twins drifted to sleep, their small hands occasionally twitching as they dreamed baby dreams. Sheikh Salam, watching his children with wonder that hadn't diminished since their birth, felt strength continuing to return to his legs, a physical manifestation of the power of love to heal. Their journey was far from over. There would be more rehabilitation milestones to achieve, cultural traditions to navigate, and the eventual return to Dubai. But in that quiet hospital room, surrounded by the family that fate and choice had built, both Sheikh Salam and Serenity knew that they had received more than the double blessing of twins. They had been blessed with the kind of love that transforms contracts into covenants, arrangements into destiny, and challenges into stepping stones toward joy. Chapter 14. Justice and Redemption. 1 year after the twins' birth, Dubai's social circles buzzed with two contrasting stories. The first was the triumphant return of Sheikh Salam, walking proudly beside his wife Serenity as they presented twins Karim and Noor at their first official function. The second was the shocking arrest of Amina al-Malik for fraud and extortion. After leaving Sheikh Salam, Amina had attempted to replicate her deception with another wealthy businessman. The contract she proposed was almost identical to her previous scheme, hiding her inability to bear children while securing financial benefits through manipulation. However, her target this time was less honorable than Sheikh Salam, and far more vindictive when he discovered her lies. The resulting scandal exposed not only her current deception, but unveiled a pattern of fraud that stretched back decades. The evidence she had tried to use against Sheikh Salam and Serenity became proof of her own duplicity instead. Dubai's courts, known for their swift justice, sentenced her to 5 years in prison. Meanwhile, at Qasr al-Rahman, life flourished with new energy. Sheikh Salam, fully recovered after intensive rehabilitation, could often be found in the palace gardens, teaching Karim to take his first steps, while Noor watched from Serenity's arms. His own steps, once thought impossible, were now strong and sure, a testament to medical science and unwavering determination. Sarah, excelling in her final year at Westbrook Academy, spent holidays in Dubai, doting on her niece and nephew while preparing for university. Her acceptance to Harvard's pre-med program was celebrated with as much joy as any royal achievement. In the quiet evenings, after the twins were asleep, Sheikh Salam and Serenity would often sit in their private garden, marveling at how a business arrangement had transformed into something so profound. Their love story, unusual as it was, had become a symbol of hope in Dubai society. Proof that true partnership transcends cultural boundaries and that genuine love can grow in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, Sheikh Salam would say, watching the desert stars with his family gathered close, the greatest blessings come disguised as challenges. And in this truth, their story found its perfect ending, not in justice served or wealth accumulated, but in the simple joy of a family bound together by love, trust, and the courage to believe in new beginnings. Subscribe if liked,